Module 6, Paper Space and Model Space. Today we're going to work on this lab, and the lab is designed to basically show you how to work within viewports. And so we have a B-sized mechanical title block with this part, just a widget shown in here. I believe it's at half scale. And then we have a viewport here showing the detail of this endpoint at 5:1 scale. And then the idea on this drawing is to be able to use viewport layering so that you have layers like the blue dimensions here showing in this viewport but not showing in this viewport, and vice versa, where we have a layer with these green dimensions on it that doesn't show in the other viewport, and that's called viewport layering. And these are also called dimension styles. So it's not a real difficult exercise, but there's some good components as far as to the knowledge that we'll gain from being able to scale the viewports and set the dimension scales and the viewport layering. So let's get started. I have my B-size title block already opened, and I'm going to just flip over to Model Space. And while I'm in Model Space, I'm going to go to the Object Line layer. I'm going to make sure that my toolbar is enabled, and that's this area right here. Here's the menu bar. And then I'm going to see that I'm on Layer Object. I have my line weights enabled. I have my polar tracking enabled. I really don't need grid and snap for this exercise, so I'm just going to start by taking a look at the overall dimensions for it. And so we have this shape that's 6 inches by 8 inches by 1 inch by 1.5. And so we'll start off with a line, and we'll just track that out to 8, and we'll track north here, and we'll go 1. And we'll enable O snaps for endpoint. There we go. 6 inches. And then this area here, we just can track it out and type 0.25. My number lock needs to be on. There we go. And then we can track down. Whoops. U for undo. Straighten it out. So we will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And sometimes we can acquire, if we have the right tracking modes available, to allow us to track across there. And that would be part of the setup for the object snap. If I go here to object snap settings and I enable parent intersection and extension and object snap tracking, and then we OK that. Now I should be able to track these over. Well, it's good in theory, but it doesn't seem like it's going to do it today. So I'm going to just make it work. Trim. Dimension. Switch over to the dimension layer. Linear. Good. Good. Now, the dimensions on the print for the exercise show 3 decimal places of accuracy. So we're going to make the same for this dimension style here. To do that, you can go to the Annotation tab, and then you can click on this little arrow here, or you can type in DDIM. We'll go to the Dimension Style Manager, and we'll say Modify, Units, Precision, bump it down to 3 or up to 3, close it, and then our dimensions will update. If you have to put in the word typical like this, where if you read through it, what you can do is before you place it for the third click, you can go and you can click text or mtext. I'm going to say text, and then I'm going to type in the word typical, enter, and then I'm going to drop that. Now, it didn't quite work because it lost my dimension on there. So let's try that one more time. Linear. No, we'll just double click on it. All right, great. And we'll do the same thing over here. We have another dimension. And then we have the component to detail here. So I'm going to pause the video while I go through and do all the detailing. Resuming, I decided to continue on with it. So we're going to offset 0.5. And we're going to offset 0.08. You can trim these. And then we can offset 0.375. And 0.030 or 30 thousandths. And that gives us our geometry. We just need to connect it up like that. Match property would be the fastest way to get that on the correct layer and line type. So that's the geometry that we have for this object. We can put one more dimension in here. That will give us the overall 1 inch. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go flip over to the B-size title block. and double click in the viewport, and then we're going to align that. Now it almost fits at 1 inch. In fact, I would say it does, and so we'll dial this in at 1:1 or full scale, and then what I'll do is I'll just kind of tighten up the dimensions enough so that I can fit it within the viewable area of the title block. You want to try to avoid crossing over dimensions when possible. Until the viewport is locked, you have to be careful not to change the scale of it. And so now it looks good enough, and so I'm going to lock it. And then I'm going to put in a secondary viewport. And to do that, I'm going to double click outside. I'm going to go to the viewport layer, and I'm going to say View, Viewport, One Viewport. And I'm just going to go and click a square. And then you can see what it does is it puts the object, and it's kind of like a camera, into model space here, where whatever I do here in model space, if I decide I want to put a circle right there, I come back here, it's reflected, and it's so that it shows a view or a viewport to that. And then if I do something in any of these viewports, I'm working on the same object. It's just multiple instances. So we want to dial in the scale of 5:1 over here. So what we do is we get this component centered in the viewport, and then we can change the scaling. They don't have a 5:1, they have a 4:1. And so we can kind of get pretty close to it there. And then we can go and we can make a custom scale. And so we'll say custom, and then we'll say add, and we'll say 5:1, and we'll say 5:1, say OK, and we'll say OK, and then we'll see if we can activate it. And there we go. So that is now set 5:1. I'm going to lock that. And so the next thing with this exercise is how to keep the dimensions at scale. And so with viewport scaling, what we can do is I can go into my dimension style, and there's two different ways to do this. One way is to manually set the dim scale, and the other way is to set it by viewport. And I'm going to set it by viewport. And so what I'll do is I'll go to the Annotate tab. I'll either type in DDIM, or I'll click on this little down arrow. I'll say Modify, and I'll go to the Fit tab, and on the Viewport Scale for Dimension features, I'm going to click Scale to Layout. And then I'll hit OK. And then I'll close that. So now when I put in the dimension, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. And I'm going to call it Dim2, or we'll call it Dim5X. And we'll give it a different color. So that one's green. We'll make this one orange. And we'll make this layer current. And then when we dimension, we'll come in here. Since the viewport's locked, I can zoom in. I'm still in this active viewport. And I'll click on linear dimension, and then I'll go from here to here, and I'll put in this 5-inch, and it automatically sets up the scale so that they wind up being consistent through the drawing. And we'll see that when we back out a little bit and look at the overall view once I get these other two dimensions on here. Now I don't quite have enough room, so what I'm going to do is go out to paper space, and then I'm going to expand the viewport a little bit, and then I'm going to hit Escape, Control R, and then I'm going to unlock it and pan it over enough so that I can get those other dimensions. And you can start to see now these micro dimensions down over here, and it looks like it also took my other dimensions and microsized them, so I'm going to need to make one more dimension scale for the full size on the other viewport and see if that holds up. Alright, so let's lock this. Put in one more dimension. And then we want to try to clean this up a little bit. Of course, it goes the other way. There we go. All right, and then this would have been perfect if it would not have changed the global dimension style. And so what I need to do is I need to go into the dimension style, and I'm going to rename this one. I'm going to say, give me one more, give me a new one, and I'll say dim full, dim 1 equals 1. If it lets me use an equal sign, I'm not sure. No, dim 1 dash 1, 1 to 1. Okay, and on the fifth tab for this one, I'm going to say use an overall scale of 1. And that's going to be what's going to be this green dimension scale. And then the standard one, I'm going to rename it dim 5 to 1. And that's going to be for the orange one. I don't think I have to do anything other than to put these on the other dimension style. So if I come here and I go here, dim 1 to 1, yes, they all go to the correct dimension scale. And then as far as freezing and thawing the viewports, what we would do is we go to the Home tab, and I'm going to freeze the dim 5x, this orange layer in this viewport. So what I would do is be to click this right here while I'm in that active big viewport, and you can see it disappears, and I get a little snowflake, reappears, disappears. If I click in this one, I can't get in there. It's kind of a glitch, so you have to go Control R. I can do the same thing with the other dim, just right here. And you don't see anything except for this little green line that you wouldn't really notice if you hadn't paid too much attention to it. Okay, so that's how to do the paper space model space drawing. Be sure to update the title block, scale 1 equals 1. We would also need to put a note in here, detail 1, scale 5 to 1. And so we could go here to the multi-line text, say detail 1. And that way people can measure the drawings. Let's see, the name of this is paper space model space. And be sure to put your name on it and save the drawing. This completes this exercise.